Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, December 10th. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the winners from Week 14, a historic week in the NFL. In this segment, we turn our attention to the opposite side, the losers. We went over who had the best week. Let's find out who had the worst week in this segment. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to get an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, December 10th. But like I was saying, we're going to finish up our winners and losers here, going over the losers side of things here. Like we said, this was a big week for both good and bad, and we have not 5, but 6 losers this week. Starting off at number 6, it's the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys needed that win tremendously bad. They still had, albeit an outside chance, but a chance at making the playoffs if a couple of things fell in the right direction. And they had a shot in that game. They had forced a punt by the Cincinnati Bengals. And then everything goes wrong. It seems like it's going great. The punt is blocked. They're going to get the ball on the plus side of the 50-yard line. They're going to be able to drive down, and they would already have been in field goal range for the best kicker in the league in Brendan Aubrey. Instead, a boneheaded decision by a Cowboys cornerback special teams player who had just been called up from the practice squad. The ball bounces right in front of him, and instead of, like you are coached to, let it go. Do not touch the ball. It is a dead ball until you touch it. He decides to try and make a play. He decides to try and be the hero, and it works out awfully. That ruins the game for the Cowboys. He touches it. He completely whiffs on it, bounces off his shoulder, misreads the bounce. It falls into the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals, who now take over and immediately make the Cowboys pay for that mistake. Jamar Chase breaks a tackle on an out-breaking route, and once he's in the clear, he's gone. You're not catching up to Jamar Chase. He is one of the fastest players in all of the NFL, and he burns them a go-ahead touchdown, and the Bengals get a much-needed win. Both of these teams needed it to get into the playoffs or keep their very slim playoff hopes alive. It's done now. The Cowboys are out. They lose Overshone as well, who played really, really solid for them these last couple of weeks. Coming off of an injury that made him miss his entire rookie season, he's most likely not only going to miss the rest of this season, but potentially the rest of next season as well. You have questions. After spending a lot of money this offseason, are they going to be able to keep a guy like Micah Parsons, who you see the difference that it makes for this Cowboys defense when he is in the game and when he's not in the game? It is leagues better. Despite the defense still not being the best, he makes life miserable for quarterbacks. He was chasing Joe Burrow around the pocket all day, all night long, and I get the feeling, is gone. He looked frustrated. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but they need to find a way to pay him. If they do not, it's going to be a long, long year for the Cowboys next season because they are in a handicap hold right now. We will see what happens. Our number 5 winner, it's the Arizona Cardinals. They had the opportunity to get back in front of this division. A massive game at home against the Seattle Seahawks. A game that was close last time they played each other, and it went pretty much the same way. They got absolutely run through. The defense that had been pretty stout all for the last 6 weeks or so let Zach Charbonnet run wild all up and down that team. That was an absolute piss poor performance by the Arizona Cardinals. They cannot go out there and be a serious team trying to make the playoffs and put up performances like that in what was probably their biggest game of the season. If they had won that, they would go into first place and into a playoff spot in an incredibly tough division. Now they fall into third. They are only ahead of those San Francisco 49ers. The Rams jump them. They're a game behind the Rams now. It is just not a good look for the Arizona Cardinals, and they need to figure something out with that offense. I don't know why Marvin Harrison and Kyler Murray cannot get on the same page. I don't know if defenses are putting extra special attention onto that, but they need to figure out a way for him to get involved with the offense. You take him, a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. He does not get the ball. He does not get the targets that he needs to get. He needs to get those targets if you're going to put such a valuable asset into them. And I don't know what's going on, whether it's him, whether it's Kyler, whether it's the coaching staff, but they need to sit down and they need to design some plays specifically for Marvin Harrison Jr. Until then, the Cardinals aren't going to quite make it this year. A good season, but not quite good enough. Our number 4 loser this week, it's Kadarius Toney. Kadarius Toney, news broke just an hour ago or so that he was cut from the team. He got a second chance, was a first-round pick with the Giants, had one game of being healthy, went for almost 200 yards, was incredibly electric, then goes to the Chiefs, plays a huge role in winning them their first Super Bowl of the 2 that they've won in a row, having a huge punt return. Then everything falls off. He develops a chronic case of butterfingers, seemingly out of nowhere. A season where with Patrick Mahomes, he was arguably coming in there as the number 1 receiver. They still had a rookie, Rashee Rice, who hadn't quite developed himself, and Kadarius Toney was in a position to explode in the NFL. Instead, he drops and he gets cut. Picked up by the Browns a couple weeks ago, called up from the practice squad, and he gets put on special teams, the role that brought him so much glory in the Super Bowl, a punt returner. He fair catches his first punt, has 2 opportunities. His first one, fair catch, throws the ball at a Steelers defender, down by 2 scores, a 15-yard taunting penalty. Then the Browns force another punt. They're still not in it. They're still down 13 points, but if they're able to get this ball and if they're able to drive quickly, they're still technically in this game. Instead, he muffs the punt. Steelers recover. Game is over. Kadarius Toney had the worst week. 2 plays, 1 a 15-yard penalty, negative, and 1 a turnover, negative. That is incredibly bad. An awful week, and just not a great week for the Browns in general. Kadarius Toney cut. I think that might be the last of him we see in the NFL, which is a shame because he's undeniably talented. He's an incredibly talented receiver, and I think he should get another chance. I don't know if he's going to. I don't know if he even deserves another chance after what he's been putting out on the field in his last couple of seasons. Our number 3 loser, it's the Chicago Bears. They finally fired Matt Eberflus. He is gone. You'd think they'd get that interim head coach boost. No. That's 7 straight losses now for the Chicago Bears as they fall to 4-9 on the season. Not just any 4-9, a pitiful looking 4-9. We saw Thomas Brown as the offensive coordinator get stuff going, but that 49ers defense was locked in. They had 4 total yards in the first half. 4 total yards in the first half. They had more punts than yards in the first half of a football game. That is sad. And they had a very similar experience last week against the Lions, where they had only 2 first downs all first half long. Then they turned it on in the second half, and I was sitting there and I was waiting. Early in the third quarter, they get a couple scores, touchdown. They are driving, then they can't convert. They score another touchdown. Rome Odunze, 2 touchdowns on the days. There's some positives here. Caleb Williams had another 2 touchdown performance. He looked okay. He looked solid. But the run game couldn't get anything going against this stout 49ers front. And everything else just went awful. The Bears defense has officially collapsed. I don't know what's going on with them. I wonder if it's a similar thing to Robert Saleh being fired with the Jets, where their defense collapsed. A defensive-minded head coach goes, and then the whole defensive scheme disappears. It's an interesting way to look at it. This is a Bears season that's gone, right? But this is just a brutal continuation of a brutal stretch of games for a franchise that has just not seen a lot of success in a very long time. And I feel bad for the Bears over there. Our number 2 loser is the Jets. They finally got a good Aaron Rodgers game, his first 300 yards performance since 2021. His first 300-yard performance. Devontae Adams caught a touchdown. Garrett Wilson should have caught a touchdown. Aaron Rodgers just led him a little bit too far to the outside. He still got the catch. They had some good games through the air. The defense was playing good football, and then they just can't convert down the stretch. The Dolphins come back, a massive comeback effort for them, and they go to overtime. Dolphins win the toss, drive right down the field, and you waste your first real good Aaron Rodgers performance that he's had as a Jet. And you look at that and you say, finally, everything seemed to click. They were playing stout defense for most of that game. They were really slowing down a potent attack from the Miami Dolphins. Aaron Rodgers was playing good football yet again, and they still find a way to lose. This seems like a team that's cursed, and it seems like a team that's going to continue to lose football games for a very long time. And our number one loser this week, it's the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. They've been horrendous. 4-game losing streak. Over that stretch, Kirk Cousins, no touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Their defense, especially their secondary, has been abysmal. The worst. Awful. Cannot explain to you in words how bad that defense has been, especially the secondary. You saw it on multiple touchdowns where the free safety was just playing in no man's land. Deep shots to Justin Jefferson, deep shots to Jordan Addison. They could not track the ball through the air. They could not track the receivers. You had corners in zone, a shallow zone, trying to cover a receiver going deep over the middle, expecting safety help, tripping over his own feet, turning and spinning, falling the wrong direction to try and make a play. That was an awful performance by the Atlanta Falcons secondary. It is unacceptable. You have a defensive coach, Raheem Morris. I think he's a good coach. Kirk Cousins, I don't think this one is on him. He played good football. He kept them in the game. But that defense, especially the secondary, is awful. They need to play some more cover too, not let those deep shots go. They didn't make the adjustments they need to. The corners aren't good enough to be left on an island right now, and they need to make some real big changes on that back end of the defense. The front end is finally getting pressure. They had 3 sacks in back-to-back games, 3+ in back-to-back games. That's great for a team that had 10 sacks entering last week. They have almost doubled their sack total in the last 2 weeks of football. They're getting home. They're getting pressure. But now the secondary is failing them, and you're seeing the scores, 38-42. These points that they're just giving up to these teams that they should not be giving up these much points to. The Falcons are the biggest losers, and they drop out of the playoffs. The Bucs take the division as well. But let me know what you think. Who was the biggest loser this week in the NFL? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to the power rankings in the NFL. 32-17 coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.